Welcome back, everyone. Happy Sunday. I hope you're all having an amazing week so far. It is now July 2nd. We're inching closer to July 4th. We've been going over the Dial of Destiny box office results very carefully so far. We got the estimated 24 million for Thursday night, which really isn't all that impressive, given that it matches up with the Flash's opening night of 24.1 million for the preview night, of course, specifically, and more. What's interesting, though, about Bob Iger is how he is beginning to get very frustrated and angry behind the scenes about something very specific we're going to be covering about this inch by inch, about what's going on over at Disney, the investors, and of course the board itself. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you also very much for the great and kind support, and let's get right into what's going on here with Mr. Iger. Now, look, Bob Iger is always this reserved kind of guy, very monotone, talking very flat and boring many of the times in his earnings calls, and that's just how his personality is. But when it comes to how he acts behind closed doors, we've heard that there's a lot of heated arguments revolving around Elemental, revolving around Indiana Jones 5, the Dial of Destiny, and what's coming up for the Marvels by this November, and how a lot of fans just do not want to go to the Disney parks anymore, etc., etc. Well, it gets even worse than that, so we're going to be covering exactly the latest of what's going on with Bob Iger and his view of the Disney boycott, and what's really going on with this boycott, and how much of an impact it's been having. So, with Bob Iger still struggling over at Disney as a CEO after the failure of Elemental, not meeting expectations with Little Mermaid, and the closure of Galactic Star Cruiser Hotel by this September, which by the way is an embarrassment to them, there lies a massive shakeup happening between himself and the higher-ups. Now, one of the major issues happening behind closed doors right now is that Bob Iger is reportedly furious and very much under pressure about the Disney boycott from many fans and park goers refusing to attend or purchase tickets for films, subscribing to Disney Plus, or even attending their Disneyland parks. This is leading to the Disney board wanting to prematurely fire Bob Iger by the very beginning of 2024 before he willingly steps down if things don't shape up with the upcoming Disney projects slated for 2023, especially with the Marvels due for release by this November featuring Brie Larson. Now, the Disney boycott is said to be having an impact on the parks and the movie-going experience for the sales, and that deeply impacts films like Indy 5 and Elemental especially. Both the board and the executives are attempting to create a massive and major restructuring over at Disney in order to put Bob Iger's wrongdoings in the past, as they are in a phase of panic and chaos over there to try and save the company from future releases failing. Now, guys, I want to just pause here quick. Now, we know that Bob Iger is a very manipulative CEO, if you guys have to ask me. I mean, this is a guy that has come forward with the Dial of Destiny saying how they are easily projecting that the Dial of Destiny is going to reach that 1 billion mark, globally speaking. Let's be real, it's not going to hit that, and I would be very surprised if it did. It would be like pulling a rabbit out of the hat if that happens. But yeah, so everything that's going on right now with Bob Iger, the executives, the board, they want him out basically, but they're still hanging on to him because they're really trying to figure out who would take his place. That's really the snag right now, is that they're not quite sure who the best fit is just yet to take over the company. Now look, we all knew that when Bob Chapek came in, it was nothing more than Bob Iger's semi-retirement, right? We all knew he was coming back eventually. That was just pretty apparent. He was a shoehorn for what was happening with the economy at the time and stuff like that. Very apparent and easy to tell stuff. Now, where we sit, Disney is really not doing that well. I mean, we are seeing and witnessing failure after failure, and it is just backfiring on them. And with the latest Dial of Destiny box office projections, it's really not looking good. So far, it's looking similar to that of The Flash, and we know how that turned out. Look, some people may love that movie, and that's fine and all, but we can't deny the fact that it is tanking at the box office because it's already being pulled out of theaters. In fact, my local theaters, by the way, are already shortening the amount of showtimes quite drastically. So I think it lines up directly with how we've been getting a lot of reports that they're pulling that movie out of thousands of theaters in the near future. So on top of this, the board is already placing a proposal that if the Marvels completely tanks at the box office, that it's time to perhaps get rid of Iger even before 2024 begins. However, that is described to be a tricky thing as well. Iger is said to be frustrated and angry about the general public standing their ground with the Disney boycott, and they are beginning to realize it had an impact on Indy 5 sales as well as a percentage of subscription loss from Disney Plus since the past couple of months. Iger is said to be so frustrated that he is desperately upselling this movie to give a false narrative that the film holds a trajectory for doing $1 billion at the box office globally to convince its successful financial end of the spectrum, globally speaking. Iger is planning to make an alarming statement about the status of Disney by this fall in one of the earnings calls, and that he's being forced to do so by the board. Now, as much as Bob Iger doesn't want to do that, the board is making him do that. And there's a reason why. There comes a point where you can't dodge this anymore. You can't dodge all of the Lucasfilm failures. We can't forget about Solo, Willow, and now the Dial of Destiny that's not looking good so far, box office-wise. Not to mention that she also wrecked everything to do with Star Wars in general, Kathleen Kennedy speaking, of course, and how Bob Iger really, could have went above and beyond to get her out of there if he really wanted to, but we've heard a big problem with that is that there were many times where nobody wanted the job. Nobody wanted that job to taint their career as a producer. And we have a couple of people in the lineup to take over Kathleen Kennedy. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. And they are all ready and go for that when the time comes. So I think that Bob Iger has been a terrible CEO, to be honest, guys. I mean, this is a guy that really should have fired Kathleen Kennedy after The Last Jedi. And I mean, like, right after. We're talking like January, maybe March, the latest of 2018 is when she should have been fired. Let's be real here. And now look what's happened to them with Marvel going in a downward spiral, Ant-Man really tanking at the box office too. It is failure after failure, and they can't sustain this anymore. I mean, they have to make a change, and that's what the board is all about right now. Making a change over at Disney, right-sizing their slate of Marvel projects, of Star Wars projects, and more. And you know what? There should not even be discussions about an Indy 5 sequel as much as Kathleen Kennedy and Phoebe Waller-Bridge talk about this and are confirming this. Mangold wants nothing to do with that, and they already want Mangold out of his Star Wars movie. They want nothing to do with him, apparently. And we'll go over that too a little bit later. There's a lot to talk about. So anyways, guys, I would love to hear your take on this all below in the comments. And if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I'll catch you guys next time.
From night to moon.